So picture this. It's the turn of the 20th century. And for Black America, this is a critical crossroads. All the promises of Reconstruction have been completely shattered, and one single, huge question is looming over everyone. How do you fight back against a system that is literally designed to crush you? Well, the answer to that question was forged in a fiery debate between two absolute intellectual giants, and their opposing ideas would go on to shape the struggle for freedom for the next 100 years. And this wasn't just some small question, right? It was everything. When you're faced with systemic violence, legal segregation, and the total stripping of your political rights, what is the most effective way forward? Do you try to build economic power from inside a broken system, or do you dedicate every single resource to tearing that system down? So on one side, you have Booker T. Washington. He championed a path of accommodation and building economic self-sufficiency. And on the other side, you've got W.E.B. Du Bois, arguing for immediate, persistent agitation for full political and civil rights. Two brilliant leaders, two fundamentally different strategies for the same goal. And make no mistake, this was not just some academic disagreement. This was a really high-stakes debate that polarized African-American leaders and basically set the course for the entire civil rights movement. The echoes of their arguments? Yeah, they're still with us today. But to really, truly grasp their positions, we have to put ourselves in the world they were living in, a world that was under the suffocating shadow of Jim Crow. So what's the backdrop for all this? Well, you have an America that's just been poisoned by this idea called the lost cause. This was a full-on, systematic rewriting of history that painted the Confederacy as this noble thing and slavery as some kind of gentle institution. It was a story that explicitly said Black Americans were incapable of governing themselves, which, of course, was used to justify white supremacy as the natural order of things. And this ideology had horrific, real-world consequences. Black voters were systematically stripped of their right to vote. Segregation was the law of the land, everywhere. The constant threat of lynching was used as a tool of terror. The Ku Klux Klan was reborn and was actually glorified in blockbuster films like The Birth of a Nation, a film that President Woodrow Wilson himself screened at the White House. This was the oppressive world Washington and Du Bois were trying to find a way through. So, in the face of this absolutely brutal reality, a powerful voice emerged with a clear strategy. Enter Booker T. Washington and his philosophy of accommodation. Washington's whole approach, it came from a place of harsh pragmatism. He basically argued for a strategic retreat. He urged Black Americans to temporarily accept social and political discrimination. The main focus, he said, should be on becoming absolutely indispensable to the American economy. But here's where it gets a little more complex. While he was publicly preaching accommodation, he was also secretly funding court cases that were challenging segregation. He was playing a very long, very dangerous game. So his public strategy, which he famously laid out in his Atlanta Compromise speech, had 4 pretty clear steps. First, accommodate. Just accept the current reality of segregation for now. Second, educate. Focus on practical, vocational education, skills in farming, industry. Third, elevate. Use those skills to build real economic power. And finally, he believed that this material prosperity would eventually win the respect of white America, and that would lead to full citizenship rights down the line. But not everyone was buying it. In fact, another towering intellectual saw a huge fatal flaw in Washington's plan, and that was W.E.B. Du Bois, who offered a powerful and radically different counter-argument. Du Bois basically asked this one piercing question: how can a community build wealth and protect that wealth if they have no political power and no protection under the law? To him, accepting second-class citizenship, even for a little while, was a surrender. It was a surrender that would only make white oppression even stronger. In his incredible, groundbreaking book, The Souls of Black Folk, he just laid it out there. He declared that the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. He wasn't going to sidestep it. He was determined to confront it head-on. So his strategy for this confrontation was something he called the talented 10th. See, while Washington was focused on industrial skills for the masses, Du Bois argued for cultivating an elite group of leaders. He believed that through a classical college education, this top 10% of Black leaders would get the intellectual firepower they needed to fight for the rights of the entire race. And that's really the crucial difference right there. Du Bois's vision was one of relentless protest. He called for what he termed persistent manly agitation, a courageous, direct political fight to dismantle Jim Crow, not to try and work within it. Now, this clash of ideas, it wasn't just talk. it actually led directly to the creation of one of the most important civil rights organizations in all of American history. Okay, so the path to action really kicks off in 1905. That's when Du Bois co-founded the Niagara movement, and its whole purpose was to explicitly reject Washington's compromise. Then the urgency gets dialed way up in 1908. A brutal race riot breaks out in Springfield, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln's hometown of all places, and it just shocks the nation. This was the catalyst. This is what pushed a group of black and white activists, including Du Bois, to form a new interracial organization in 1909, the NAACP. So the NAACP, it was basically the institutional embodiment of Du Bois's philosophy. Its mission was completely unambiguous: achieve full equality. Its tools were political action and, crucially, legal challenges in the courts. And with Du Bois as the editor of its magazine, The Crisis, it had this powerful voice to expose injustice and rally support all across the country. But here's the thing. Founding the NAACP didn't just end the debate. Not at all. In fact, that tension between Washington's accommodation and Du Bois's agitation, it continues to echo in our conversations about justice today. You know, both men left behind these incredibly distinct and powerful legacies. Washington's emphasis on economic self-help and entrepreneurship, that's still a really powerful strain in Black thought. And at the same time, Du Bois's strategy of direct agitation and legal action, that became the literal blueprint for the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Seriously, just think about it for a second. When we talk about strategies for closing the racial wealth gap today, or how to fight systemic injustice, we are often relitigating the exact same core arguments of the Washington-Du Bois debate. Is it about economic empowerment, or is it about political confrontation? Which kind of brings us right back to the central question, doesn't it? Here in the 21st century, does progress come from building economic power within the structures that exist, or does it come from agitating to dismantle those structures entirely? You know, maybe the answer isn't about choosing one path, but about understanding how to walk both.